I think it's very likely that Renzi will end up losing this vote. According to some polls, only 1 in 10 Italians actually know what this referendum is really about. That's to say constitutional reform. Most of them just think it's a vote on Renzi, and he's not very popular. So if he loses, then there's kind of a choose your own adventure for potential outcomes. And I think that in and of itself, all that uncertainty will result in a lot of market volatility. In my view, the biggest risk is actually for the banking sector, though, even more so than political risk. And there will be some political instability. I think that they'll probably cobble together a government, avoid elections. I think Renzi will be tasked with putting together a government. And that government won't be able to do anything but electoral reform. So Italy won't get the structural reforms it needs. This is the rosy scenario, that Italy doesn't grow for a long time.
What's been interesting, I think, in recent weeks, as we've focused on the detail of actually what Renzi is proposing, there is a very undemocratic element to the way in which senators will be selected rather than elected. And I think people have begun to ask questions about, well, to what extent is this referendum really about root and branch reform that will assist economic activity rather than a settling of scores with the Senate?
Yeah, there's a real concern among people in Italy that this is actually just a power grab. And also something that's been highlighted a lot in the local media is that actually a lot of these senators will get immunity, and Italians don't want more politicians getting immunity. So a lot of people will be voting no off the back of that. So it's not about, centralizing power or making it easier to legislate in Italy. It's about these other issues that are connected to that.
The market is tying the fortunes of the Italian banks, and even more widespread than that, European banks, to the fortunes of the Italian referendum. Is that the right trade when you look at all the recapitalisation plans, the cleanup of NPLs expected from the Italian banking sector? What needs to happen in the constitution for there to be progress for European banks and Italian banks?
So I actually think the constitutional reform is only related to the banks insofar as it will affect market confidence in banks. They've cobbled together a private sector solution to try to recapitalize these banks. And investors might not be interested in participating anymore if you have all this political instability in Italy off the back of this referendum. And if you have a crisis in the Italian banking sector kicking off again, not only could that spread across Europe, but also the solution that Renzi might come up with is to just break the rules and bail out the banks, in which case you will be massively undermining banking union, which is the only area in which they've actually made progress in Europe since the beginning of the crisis.
So it's a critical time for the banks, is what you're saying, and the market was right to be cautious yesterday.
That's right, and not just for Italy, for the rest of Europe as well.